You know, there's one story that humanity just refuses to forget. It's the story of the Great Flood. And what's so wild is that this tale seems to be etched into our collective memory. It crosses cultures, continents, and thousands of years.
I mean, just think about it. You've got different gods, totally different languages, different climates, from the deserts of the Middle East to ancient China, and yet the basic story is always the same, and it's kind of spooky. A world that's gone wrong, a divine warning, one person chosen to survive, a boat built against all odds, and then a world washed clean, ready for a fresh start.
So why? What is it about this one disaster that has so completely captured the human imagination? I mean, this can't just be a coincidence, right? This is a global pattern. And to really get it, we have to look way deeper than just the surface of the story.
And that's really the heart of what we're digging into here. We're going to park the question of whether a literal worldwide flood actually happened for a minute. Instead, we're going to ask something that's frankly a lot more interesting. Why did our ancestors take the sheer terror and chaos of a flood and turn it into this profound, sacred story about judgment, survival, and rebirth?
Okay, so let's dive right in. The best way to do this is to compare three of the most massive, most influential flood stories in all of human history. Each one tells you something really unique about the culture that told it. All right, let's look at three of the big ones. First up, in the Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to just wipe out humanity because people are being too nosy. Seriously. So the theme here is really about divine error, the gods acting on a whim. Then you've got the Genesis story in the Abrahamic traditions. The motivation there, totally different. It's all about human violence and corruption. This makes it a story of moral judgment. And finally, in the Hindu tradition, the flood isn't a one-off thing. It's part of a massive cosmic cycle, the end of an age, or a yuga. The whole theme is cyclical renewal.
And right there, that contrast tells you so much about their worldviews. In the Mesopotamian story, the gods actually feel bad about it later. It was a mistake they made because they were annoyed. But in Genesis, oh no, that flood is deliberate. It's a calculated, corrective act. God isn't making a mistake. He's passing a sentence on a world that's lost its way, and then he sets up a new moral contract. One is about a divine temper tantrum, the other is about divine law.
But then you have the Hindu story, which is a whole different way of looking at it. The flood here isn't a punishment at all. It's just an expected part of the universe's rhythm. The hero Manu is saved by the god Vishnu, but not just to have more kids and repopulate the earth. He's saved to protect the sacred knowledge, the Vedas, and the wise sages. So the point isn't to punish the past, it's to make sure the wisdom from that past makes it into the future.
All right, so we've got these incredible, powerful stories. But what happens when we switch gears from ancient texts to hard science? What do the rocks themselves have to say? So let's be super clear about this. The geological record shows zero evidence of a single flood that covered the entire planet all at one time. But, and this is a huge but, that does not mean the story comes from nowhere. Not at all. 120 meters. Just try to picture that. That's about 400 feet. That is how much the sea level rose all over the world at the end of the last ice age when the glaciers melted. Can you imagine living on a coastline and just watching the ocean rise? Not slowly over centuries, but in terrifying, dramatic bursts. These are the real events that could be hiding behind the myths. Science absolutely confirms it. Massive pulses of meltwater coming off glaciers, triggering devastating regional megafloods. Entire coastlines just gone. Whole villages completely erased. For the people who lived through that, it wasn't a world ending. It was their world ending. To them, it would have felt total, absolute, apocalyptic. So this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. How does that raw, terrifying memory of a real-life disaster get transformed into a structured, meaningful myth that gets told for thousands of years? Well, it seems to happen in about 4 steps. First, the real catastrophe happens, a horrifying, world-changing flood. Second, that trauma gets seared into the collective memory, passed down from one generation to the next. Third, the belief systems people already have start to work on that raw memory, trying to find a cause, a reason, a why. And finally, that random, terrifying chaos gets shaped into a story. It becomes a tale with a purpose, a lesson about divine judgment, or a promise of a new beginning. So here's the big takeaway. The Great Flood story isn't literal history, and it's not pure fiction. It's something much more profound. It's the memory of a real catastrophe, shaped by belief. It's about the very human need to take an unbearable, chaotic event and give it meaning. It's how we process trauma on the scale of an entire civilization.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of chilling thought. This ancient process, turning catastrophe into meaning, well, it didn't stop in the Bronze Age. It's a fundamental part of how we make sense of our world. So when you look around at our own chaotic times, you have to ask yourself, what are our floods? And what are the myths we're building right now to help us survive them?